350 kilowatts of electric power, delivered instantly, on a soaking wet street circuit in South Florida. That combination scared the FIA enough to ban boost mode in the rain, just 2 weeks before the Miami Grand Prix. And now the forecast is calling for thunderstorms directly over the Hard Rock Stadium on Sunday afternoon, with probabilities climbing past 80%. 20 drivers are about to race cars that nobody, not a single team on the grid, has driven in serious wet conditions before. So what happens when 20 drivers hit a soaking circuit in cars they have never driven in the rain? And what happens when the rules designed to keep them safe have never been tested either? 2 days before that forecast changed everything, the Miami paddock looked like a completely different weekend. Friday and Saturday baked under near-record South Florida heat. The U.S. National Weather Service issued a special weather statement warning about temperatures pushing into the mid-90s. Teams were worried about tire degradation and overheating, not aquaplaning. That concern evaporated the moment the Sunday models updated. Contingency plans are already active for the race. The FIA has the authority to move the race, start time forward if conditions demand it. A power last used at the 2024 Sao Paulo Grand Prix, so there is recent precedent for exactly this call. The forecast numbers tell the story. Multiple weather models are converging on an 80 to 88% probability of rain during Sunday's race window, with over a 50% chance of actual thunderstorms. Even the most conservative forecast still flags a 40% chance of precipitation, with gusting winds reaching 36 kilometers per hour. Every credible model points the same direction. Rain is coming. The question is when it arrives, and how hard it hits. This is where the story takes a turn nobody expected. Miami is not like other circuits when it comes to weather disruption. A U.S. federal protocol requires any major outdoor public event to suspend operations if a thunderstorm approaches. The reason is the medical helicopter. It cannot legally fly during an active lightning warning. And Formula One cannot race without that helicopter in the air. The moment lightning is visible, thunder is audible, or the sky looks threatening enough to trigger the National Weather Service threshold, on-track activity stops. No negotiation. This protocol applies at Miami, Austin, and Las Vegas. It does not exist at Silverstone, or Monza, or Suzuka. It means the FIA's race director is operating with a hair-trigger red flag that has nothing to do with track conditions and everything to do with US airspace law. The Miami Grand Prix has run 4 times since joining the calendar in 2022. The Grand Prix itself has never been run in wet conditions. But there is a warning from recent history. The 2025 sprint at Miami saw heavy rain hit in the hour before lights out. The race was red flagged after a single formation lap, shortened to 18 laps, and Charles Leclerc crashed his Ferrari on an installation lap as conditions worsened. Oscar Piastri won as the track dried. Miami has flirted with rain before. A fully wet Grand Prix has never actually happened. South Florida averages 11 rainy days in May, with nearly 6 inches of rainfall across the month. The early May race date sits just before Atlantic hurricane season begins in June, but Florida's tropical convective storms do not follow a schedule. They build fast, hit hard, and dump enormous volumes of water in short windows. A Miami thunderstorm is not a light drizzle rolling across the track over 90 minutes. It is a wall of water that can drop visibility to near zero in seconds. That is the kind of rain these drivers might face on Sunday. In a matter of hours, that could change. The FIA has had about 2 weeks to prepare for this exact scenario. And the preparation reveals how seriously the governing body takes the combination of these cars and a wet track. On April 20th, the World Motorsport Council approved a package of mid-season rule changes. The headline item, codified in Article B, 7.2.1g, is blunt. In low-grip conditions, the use of boost mode is inhibited and is not allowed. That single sentence strips away the most aggressive overtaking weapon in the 2026 car's arsenal. Boost mode in these cars delivers up to 350 kilowatts of additional electrical power. That is roughly 470 brake horsepower on top of the standard hybrid output. It replaced DRS as the primary overtaking tool, a push-to-pass system that gives chasing cars a massive straight-line power advantage. In the dry, it works. Cars close up on the straights, the racing improves, the spectacle delivers. In the wet, that same 350 kilowatt spike becomes a different animal entirely. The 2026 power unit is the most radical redesign Formula One has seen in over a decade. The old MGU-H is gone. The MGU-K's electrical output has been tripled compared to the previous generation. The cars now run on a roughly 50-50 split between combustion and electrical power, with 100% sustainable fuel feeding a smaller, less powerful V6 turbo engine. All of that extra performance lives on the electrical side. And electric motors do not build power gradually the way combustion engines do. They hit peak output in milliseconds. On a dry track with full mechanical and aerodynamic grip, that instant torque is a feature. on a soaking surface with drastically reduced traction. That kind of power application breaks the rear tires loose, triggers snap oversteer, and sends cars sideways at over 200 km per hour. That is not a theory. That is the exact concern the drivers raised with the FIA during pre-season discussions. There is almost no real-world data on how these power units behave in standing water. The energy harvesting system relies heavily on braking, and wet braking zones are longer, less predictable, and harder to model. The entire energy management strategy that teams spend weeks calibrating for each circuit goes out the window when the track surface changes mid-race. The paddock knows it. Hardly any driver on the grid has turned a lap in these cars on a genuinely wet track. A handful of laps at the Barcelona shakedown is the total sum of experience, spread across maybe 2 teams. The cars carry quirks that nobody fully understands yet, and the general consensus up and down the pit lane is that they are going to be challenging, counterintuitive, and genuinely tricky in low-grip conditions. When it rains in Miami, it normally does it properly. Verstappen called the entire April 20th rule package a tickle, implying the FIA still has not gone far enough to make these cars safe in the wet. But here is the detail that barely anyone noticed. The active aerodynamics are restricted too. The driver adjustable bodywork, the system that replaced DRS on the chassis side, is limited to partial activation of low drag mode in wet designated zones. The cars default to a high downforce configuration, trading straight-line speed for stability. Combined with the boost, ban, what you get is a race where the 2 most significant performance differentiators in Formula One's 2026 rule set are stripped away at the exact moment conditions become most dangerous. Think about what that means tactically. In the dry, a driver behind another car can press a button, unleash 350 kilowatts, flatten their rear wing, and blow past on the straight. That is the entire overtaking philosophy of 2026. Remove it, and you are back to basics. Slipstreaming, braking later, carrying more speed through corners on a surface where the limit of grip changes from one lap to the next. The teams with the best pre-programmed wet engine maps will have an advantage, but even that advantage is tiny compared to the gap between a great rain driver and an average one. The grid is about to race blind. Not a single team has meaningful wet weather data in these cars. Ferrari and Red Bull ran limited laps during the Barcelona shakedown earlier this year, but limited is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. There are no accumulated race miles in the rain, no tire degradation curves on a soaking surface, and no validated energy management strategies for wet conditions. The April 20th rule change was a safety measure, not a performance tool, and it has never been applied in a competitive session. If you are looking for a driver who benefits from this kind of chaos, one name keeps surfacing. By July 6, 2008, Lewis Hamilton had already shown flashes of what he could do in the rain. By the end of that afternoon at Silverstone, he had erased all doubt. Hamilton started 4th in his McLaren, on a circuit drowning in one of the heaviest downpours the British Grand Prix had ever seen. He won by over 68 seconds. That winning margin was the largest in Formula One since the 1995 Australian Grand Prix. That is not a typo, by the way. Over a minute of clear track between Hamilton and second place. His championship rivals fell apart around him. Felipe Massa spun 5 times. Robert Kubica struggled for grip. Hamilton drove through near-zero visibility, spray filling his mirrors, his visor fogging, and still pulled away from every other car on the grid. It ranks among the 10 greatest drives in the sport's entire history. A year before Silverstone, Hamilton had already won in extreme conditions at Fuji during his debut season. 25 of 67 laps ran behind the safety car that day. He won at Monaco in 2008, despite losing control and hitting the barrier at the Tabac corner, then recovering to take the victory anyway. 12 years after Silverstone, Hamilton did it again at a freshly resurfaced Istanbul Park in November of 2020. The new tarmac turned the Turkish Grand Prix into an ice rink. Hamilton qualified 6th. He gambled on a one-stop strategy using intermediate tyres, while rivals around him pitted twice and 3 times. He won by over 30 seconds, and clinched his record, equaling 7th World Championship, matching Michael Schumacher. It remains one of the most controlled wet weather performances in modern Formula One. Those are just highlights from a much longer list. He won wet and drying races at Silverstone in 2015 and 2016. He delivered a wet weather masterclass at Interlagos in 2016, beating Nico Rosberg by over 11 seconds in a race that was red flagged for standing water on the track. The Brazilian rain was so intense that visibility dropped to almost nothing on the main straight, and Hamilton still extended his lead through it. The unbeaten streak is what cements the reputation. From the 2014 Japanese Grand Prix through the 2019 German Grand Prix, Hamilton won every single wet-affected race he entered, nearly 5 years without losing when it rained. Verstappen finally ended that run in Germany, but the streak itself tells the full story. When grip disappears and car performance narrows, Hamilton's instinctive throttle control, his ability to read a changing surface, and his willingness to brake later than anyone else on a slippery track separates him from the rest of the field. In 2026, Hamilton is 41 years old, driving for Ferrari and sitting 5th in the World Championship. He is 12 points behind his teammate Charles Leclerc after 4 rounds. He qualified 7th for Saturday's sprint and finished 7th, battling with Verstappen in the early laps. On pure pace in dry conditions at Miami, he has been around 3/10 behind Leclerc all weekend. A wet race does not care about 3/10. The real question is what Sunday's rain does to the championship picture. Ferrari brought 11 upgrades to Miami this weekend. That is the largest package of any team on the grid. The car is faster than it was in Japan, where the team last raced. Leclerc finished 3rd in the sprint. And the SF26 is showing genuine progress after a difficult start to the year. The car underneath Hamilton is better than it was 2 weeks ago. If the track surface gets wet, the gap between Hamilton and the frontrunners shrinks dramatically. Meanwhile, the team that dominated Saturday is the one with the most to lose. McLaren's Lando Norris took the first non-Mercedes pole position of the 2026 season in sprint qualifying, posting a 1:27.869, and won the sprint comfortably ahead of Oscar Piastri. McLaren's upgraded MCL40 is the car of the weekend so far. Their advantage is built around a heavily revised chassis package and renewed confidence on a circuit that suits their car. Rain erases chassis advantages. Standing water does not care about updated floor edges or optimized barge boards. When visibility drops and grip vanishes, the performance gap between the fastest car and the 5th fastest car compresses to almost nothing. The cars that thrive in the wet are the ones with the smoothest power delivery and the most predictable rear-end behavior. And the drivers who thrive in the wet are the ones who have done it before, repeatedly, under the most extreme conditions the sport has produced. Mercedes leads the championship with Kimi Antonelli 1st and George Russell 2nd. Antonelli already lost ground in the sprint after a 5-second track limits penalty dropped him from 4th to 6th. An electronics glitch apparently caused a poor start, and the whole afternoon unraveled from there. A wet race introduces chaos that a rookie leading the championship for the first time simply has not experienced at this level before. Antonelli is fast, there is no question about that. But managing a championship lead in a downpour with untested cars and no boost mode is a different test entirely. Red Bull sits further back after a difficult opening to the season. The significant upgrade package brought to Miami moved Verstappen up to 5th in the sprint. And that is the strongest result the team has managed so far in 2026. Verstappen is one of the few drivers on the grid with a wet weather reputation that rivals Hamilton's. If the rain comes, Red Bull suddenly becomes relevant in a way they have not been all season. The championship is wide open after just 4 rounds. Mercedes still leads. McLaren just took their first pole and sprint win. Ferrari brought 11 new parts. And Red Bull finally looks competitive again after a dismal opening trio of races. Sunday's conditions could rewrite the entire pecking order. For the past 3 races, the story of 2026 has been about Mercedes' dominance, the aero development war, and which team can solve the energy management puzzle fastest. All of that goes out the window the moment the first raindrop hits the Hard Rock Stadium asphalt. Because in the wet, with boost mode disabled, with active aero locked down, with no team holding any wet weather data, the only variable left is the person sitting in the cockpit. And the cockpit that matters most might not be the one leading the championship. Lewis Hamilton has been that variable before. At Silverstone in the rain, at Istanbul on ice, at Interlagos in a storm, at Fuji in a monsoon. Every time the conditions stripped the cars back to basics, Hamilton was the one who came out ahead. He is 41 now, in a new team, in a car he is still learning, sitting 12 points behind his teammate after a 7th place finish in a dry sprint. Sunday is not going to be dry. And the last time Lewis Hamilton drove a Ferrari in conditions where grip disappeared and pure instinct took over, nobody was watching. Because that session happened at Barcelona, behind closed doors, during a winter shakedown that lasted a handful of laps. Whatever Hamilton learned in those laps, Sunday in Miami is when it matters.